Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back with another Are You Andy? Tonight we are taking a look at the newest Flying Colours album entitled Third Degree. Flying Colours is a progressive supergroup with members including Casey McPherson on lead vocals, rhythm guitar, and keyboards, Steve Morse on lead guitar, Neil Morse on keyboards, lead and backing vocals, Dave LaRue on bass, and Mike Portnoy on drums, lead and backing vocals. Previous albums include Flying Colours in 2012 and Second Nature in 2014. Now, I totally understand if you aren't familiar with this progressive rock band. They aren't the most well-known progressive band going, but you might know them by their bits and pieces. For example, Neil Morse is well known as a solo artist as well as working with Transatlantic. Dave LaRue worked with Dixie Dregs, Steve Morse Band, Joe Satriani, and Stevie Vai. Steve Morse has worked with the Steve Morse Band, as well as Dixie Dregs, Deep Purple, and Kansas. And Mike Portnoy has worked with Dream Theater and Transatlantic. Casey McPherson is one of the newer faces in this scene, but he isn't a slouch himself. He was signed to Disney Records, who also has signed people like Miley Cyrus, Jonas Brothers, and Jesse McCartney. McPherson was the lead singer of Alpha Rev, which never heard of that band, but apparently had a debut album, New Morning, which spent 17 weeks on the Billboard Top 10 chart. Who knew? After that happened, Peter Collins, who was a music producer for both Rush and Bon Jovi, came to Casey McPherson, saw that he wrote his own stuff and played multiple instruments, and asked him to join this band. Other things that happened before then, you probably know if you're a Dream Theater fan, is Mike Portnoy left Dream Theater right after Black Clouds and Silver Linings and before Dramatic Turn of Events. As someone who's followed Dream Theater a lot, I remember exactly when that happened. I was really saddened to hear about that. I was, of course, curious to see what else Mike Portnoy would do. He had a couple of bands, Adrenaline Mob, a band that has had a couple CDs, but not really memorable to me, and Flying Colours, the one that I was a little bit more excited to listen to because it was progressive. Flying Colours, their first album, had a lot of really solid songs and a lot of really good diversity. Whether you had some more standard progressive songs like Blue Ocean, or some more classical ones like Killa and Everything Changes, some harder songs like Shoulda Coulda Woulda, Forever and a Daze, All Falls Down, some more pop songs like The Storm and Better Than Walking Away, or some more kind of like 70s, 60s psychedelic ideas like Love Is What I'm Waiting For and Fool in My Heart. And of course you have the prog closer epic Infinite Fire 12-minute song that's absolutely phenomenal. A lot of really solid bits and pieces, everyone sounding really solid. Of course, with a band like this, with so many people having so many years in the business, their musical technicality is going to shine through. However, there were some problems with this album, particularly some weaker songs because of some weaker singing. Fool in My Heart, very schmaltzy with Mike Portnoy being the lead singer on this song. Neil Morse having some solid vocals, but not all of them being memorable. Casey McPherson wasn't the main vocalist throughout the whole entire album. If he was, I think some of it would have been a little bit better, but there were some bits and pieces that just didn't stand out. And because of that, it's a solid album, but it wasn't my favorite album of 2012. But it made me interested for what this band could do later on. When their second album came out, Second Nature, I wasn't really listening to a lot of music during that time. Remember listening to this, but I don't remember it that well. I'll definitely have to go back to it again. Strangely enough, I was watching a Cover Killer Nation review, and in the middle of it, he brought up a kind of quickie chart of other albums that he had listened to and what scores he gave them. Right then and there, saw Flying Colours and was instantly reminded of this band. It's been 5 years since they put out a new album, and of course, I was interested in hearing them. I wanted to see if they were just as good, if not better than what they did before. And I'm super excited to have listened to it. It was an instant payoff. To be fair, you're not getting really anything new in terms of diversity. You're going to get some songs that are a little bit more straightforward, more rock-based, like The Lost Inside and more. You get stuff that's a little bit more classical prog, like Cadence. You get something a little bit more funky, like Guardian and Geronimo. You get some prog epics like Last Train Home and Crawl, and you get some more simplistic and more mainstream songs like You Are Not Alone and Love Letter. However, what works so well on this album is how solid every song is. There isn't a dull moment on this album to me. Why that is because everyone is on top of their game. Casey McPherson does most of the singing throughout this whole entire album. There's only bits and pieces where someone else is singing, but each time they are, it adds a lot to the album. There are some absolutely gorgeous melodies throughout this album, ones that make some simpler songs much more effective and infectious, and ones that add some solid layering to really complex songs. So for example, The Lost Inside starts off like a really solid hard rock, anthemic rock song. Kind of bluesy, very simplistic, but what makes this stand out is that chord progression on the chorus and how well Casey McPherson sings on that chorus. Starting off with his falsetto and going into a much bigger and brighter and heavier chest voice. That chorus saves what could have been a weaker song on this album, and the rest of the song is such an interesting listen afterwards. More, another simplistic song, but one that works well with Casey's singing. The chorus itself is very reminiscent of a Muse song. He sounds really solid on those legato lines and brings a lot of power and a lot of subtlety as well. When you get to that bridge part, he is shining with a little bit of a softer voice before bringing back into that heavier vibe. Cadence and Guardian, some of the better melodies on the album, and adds a lot of color to some more complex progressive songs. Geronimo, really laid back, and the way that he sings on there adds to that laid back feel. The chorus on this one and also on Guardian, not the most memorable because they're a little bit poppy, but they are still very solid pieces to the puzzle. And then you keep going with You Are Not Alone, one of the most emotional songs I've heard all year. It has this 80s ballad vibe, but it's absolutely gorgeous. His melody line on here is so effective over this really simplistic song, especially with all the chord changes that are going on, all the key changes. It is just so breathtaking, especially a song about Hurricane Harvey and how it affected Houston and helping out the people there. Such a nice change of pace on this album. Then you get the songs that other people come in and help out a little bit more. So for example, Last Train Home and Crawl both use other vocalists from the band. Last Train Home, you have a little bit of Neil Morse singing on this bridge part with Casey McPherson adding some nice harmony lines. It's a nice solid bridge part that help span this whole entire song, which we'll talk a little bit more in length shortly. Casey McPherson's very bluesy and legato lines on the verses, absolutely solid. And then when he picks it up a little bit more when the strings come in, adds some great intensity on his high range. Crawl is just absolutely powerful as a closer, but it starts off slowly and subtly, and of course, Casey adds some great depth with the dynamics. Easily one of the best choruses on the album by far. Mike Portnoy adds a part on the end with this rubato section. And he's not necessarily the best vocalist, but it's really effective for this particular song before going into the last chorus. Of course, I haven't talked about Love Letter, which all three of them have a shining role. This song is very Beatles and Beach Boys-esque. Very psychedelic, has some a cappella parts. What's lovely is that McPherson, Morse, and Portnoy all have a verse or a bridge that they sing on, making for a really catchy song. What I love though also is that during the choruses, as each person sings, then they also add another layer to that chorus. It shines through on one of the last choruses when everything else drops out except for Morse, McPherson, and Portnoy and their vocal lines. Let's go a little bit more into these arrangements. What's also really cool about these arrangements is that everyone gets a chance to shine. The Lost Inside, you get a lot of really solid drumming from Portnoy, making a very simple song and arrangement more effective as each verse goes on. Each verse has a little bit of a different drumming style, and particularly one that stands out to me is the third verse, where he does a lot more work on the cymbals and hi-hats, especially these triplet ideas that make for really cool and engaging listens. Of course, there's also this part where, as with any standard rock or prog song, you get a guitar solo and a synth solo, but the choruses, Portnoy and McPherson, make this song become much more memorable than just a simple rock song. Portnoy also stands out again on More, where they have this interlude which switches between 3/4 and 6/8, even though the guitar, bass, and synth lines stay consistent in their timing, Portnoy changes up between 3/4 and 6/8. If you were to ask me the best way to differentiate between 3/4 and 6/8, this is the prime example that I would show you. The way that he fills everything makes for a really cool listen with that particular part. Also, the bass line is a little bit slower, a little bit more Carnival-esque, but adds another nice layer to everything that's going on. Cadence does solid with its timing and with the more classical approaches, especially that interlude with all these different layering of parts, and then eventually getting to a really, really solid guitar solo. Guardian, what stands out here is the drumming and the bass line, especially when the bass has its solo about halfway through. Killer solo going into another killer guitar solo. Last Train Home does solid with its whole entire arrangement, switching between a lot of different ideas. This isn't necessarily a song that is the most experimental or the most original, but it takes a lot of the classic prog approaches and does it very well. Whether it's the more dramatic and slower opening, the flowing interlude part with the bass guitar and synths having a lot of flowing lines while Portnoy changes up the pace of the drumming. It feels like a Dream Theater interlude, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then you get that acoustic part with Morse and McPherson before you get that string part, and then going into one more final heavy dramatic chorus. Geronimo stands out for its killer bass line. This song slaps. The drumming, the bass, absolutely catchy as hell. Very Steely Dan-esque. Yes, there's a part where it gets a little bit more simplistic and a little bit more anthemic, but it builds to that last chorus phenomenally. You Are Not Alone stands out for its beautiful arrangement, its changes in key centers, the absolutely gorgeous intro and outro chord progressions. And that guitar solo, though simplistic, absolutely effective, especially the ending of it. Love Letter, love the arrangement, love the vibe, love the catchiness of it. There's also a really solid guitar solo that feels very Queen-esque. And the bass part, though simple, has some very solid lines in there as well. And then finally, Crawl stands out because of the vibe throughout the whole entire song. This song, to me, builds the best throughout. The piano flourishes at the beginning set the tone for everything else to come, whether it's the second verse where the guitar mimics that idea and the whole entire band comes in, or if it's the third verse where the strings mimic the piano part. The Stars Are Falling Down isn't the most interesting part to me, but it moves well into, again, a phenomenal chorus, and then after that the song ebbs and flows between faster and heavier parts like the guitar solo sections and softer parts like the legato vocals from McPherson with some flowing piano and hi-hat work, and the rubato section with Portnoy. Eventually comes back to that last chorus, but the journey itself is absolutely phenomenal. And that's, to me, what a lot of this album is. I love the journey throughout every song. Yes, there's only 9 songs in 60 minutes, but nothing seems out of place. Do I have some nitpicks? Yes. I think the bridge part on More, though solid, isn't the most interesting part, though I do enjoy the guitar part. I also find some of the choruses a little bit weaker, like Geronimo and Guardian being a little bit more pop and a little bit more simplistic. And then Lost Inside and More, though the verses have a lot there, they aren't the most interesting verses comparatively to everything else. I also have some nitpicks in terms of some of the way that McPherson ends some of his lines, especially on the last choruses of More and You Are Not Alone, where he either stays on the note or goes down rather than going up and really extending his vocal range. However, when those are the nitpicks, that means that we have a truly phenomenal album. This album scratches every itch that I have in progressive music. I haven't had this fulfilling of an album since The Mountain or Affinity, either of those albums by Haken. This honestly is the album that I wish Dream Theater put out this year, and it feels such a long time ago that Dream Theater put out an album. I almost forgot that they did because it was so lackluster to me. This doesn't do anything truly new, but this album shows the technique, the expertise, the longevity of all these players and how they can mold together into such an incredible album. because every person on this album gets a chance to shine, and even gives a lot of room for Casey McPherson to be able to shine later on. I absolutely adore this album. There's no single song on here that I hate. I've honestly have played a lot of these songs on repeat ever since I've listened to it. This, to me, is right up there for album of the year, and I hope that you check this out. If I can't gush enough about this album. Of course, this album gets a play on repeat. If you are someone who's trying to get into progressive rock, this is the perfect album to get into, because you get a lot of more mainstream songs too, a little bit more poppy, a little bit more simplistic ideas like The Lost Inside and more, and Love Letter, You Are Not Alone. But you also get some pretty accessible progressive songs. Caden's Guardian, Crawl, and Last Train Home, all pretty accessible as prog songs. Is it for every progressive listener? Probably not. I can understand if someone doesn't like Love Letter or You Are Not Alone. I can understand if they find The Lost Inside and More a little bit too simple for them. However, I can't get enough of this album. There's just so much diversity, and I'm super excited to have gone back to this band. This is their best album to date, and I would love to see where they can go from here. But that is my time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like or hate this album and your reasons why. Let me know other albums from 2019 you'd like me to review. Share this with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel. That way I know you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see this channel become bigger and better for the future. So I'll be back tomorrow with another Are You In? Till then, this is Music Fan, and I'm signing off.